Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tech Dialogue. It's been it's been a busy start to May. We're pretty much halfway through May now, and it's just been crazy. And I think the remaining days we have left in May are also going to be just as hectic for me. But nevertheless, I wanted to share some great news today, and it's something that I've been working towards for a little while, but something that I wanted to achieve for quite some time now. For those that follow me across social media platforms will probably already know what I'm about to say, but this episode is going to be all focused on that great news and also the process and trial and tribulations that I kind of went through to get to the point at which I am today. So without further ado, that news is I passed the CISSP, the ISC squared Certified Information System Security Professional certification on Monday just gone, actually, so a few days ago now. And I've just been processing the fact that I've passed it. I mean, for those that don't know what the CISSP is, it's pretty much one of the IT certifications out there to have, or IT security certifications to have, and it's up there on the list of. And I'm pretty sure if you did a Google search, or these days are we doing GPT searches maybe, but I'm pretty sure if you searched, you'd see that the CISSP is kind of up there as known to be sort of one of the most difficult IT certifications to achieve, and I've managed to achieve that now. So it's a huge achievement for me, and like I said, it's something that I wanted to, or the certification itself is something that I wanted to achieve from pretty much starting out in the IT industry and starting to understand certifications, and with it being a sort of one of the certifications to have, I wanted to get that certification. The reason why I'm only just getting around to it now is because last year I decided to my plan has always been to get the CCIE or the Cisco CCIE security first, and then once I have that, then go and get the CISSP. However, last year I did 2 attempts of the CCIE security lab. So I've got the CCMP security / CCIE security written, if that's even a thing now. And last year I spent the whole year pretty much trying to get the CCIE security. And obviously I did the preparation before that. I did all the labbing, the studying, everything that I needed to do in order to prepare myself for the CCIE lab. And for those that don't know, the CCIE security lab is, again, or the CCIE in general, again, is one of the certifications in the industry to have. And I think it pretty much goes without saying that, working for Cisco, that is definitely one of the certifications that I want to get, because it's the highest class really. And once I've completed that, then I've kind of got to that stage where I want to be. And working with security technologies, Cisco security technologies on a daily basis, for me, it just really makes sense to get. Nevertheless, I did all the studying, the labbing, everything that I needed to do, as I said, to be able to get to a point at which I felt comfortable and confident enough to go and attempt the lab exam, which is 8 hours in total for one exam. So I sat that exam twice, and so it was 8 hours each time, and it's a lot. It takes a lot out of you, and I did that twice last year. So all the preparation before, in between, and doing the exams itself, it took a lot out of me. I spent a lot of time dedicated to the CCIE security lab. I put a lot of things to the side in my personal life, also in my professional life, and tried to get the CCIE security lab. I've not managed to get it yet. It's not the end of the road for me, for those that have already listened to other podcasts and other talks that I've done about this and sharing my experience. It is something that I still want to get, but I made the decision after the second attempt of trying to get the CCIE security out of the way, to pause, reflect, and reprioritize, because I'd already spent a year solely focused on trying to get this certification. I put a lot of things to the side. I dropped a lot of things, and it was all because of this certification. And by the end of it, I was not disheartened, but I was tired. I was tired of trying to beat the clock, is what I call it, because I felt like, I knew the technologies enough, but I just couldn't beat the clock and get things in the right order, in the way that I needed to be in order to pass the lab. So I think, in all honesty, I was a little bit burnt out when I walked away from that second lab attempt. I honestly don't even know if I really cared whether I passed or not, because for me, when I was doing the lab exam, when I was reading the tasks, everything made sense. So that told me that I knew what I needed to do. It was just a process of getting that right and within the allotted time. So with feeling burnt out and all the rest of it, and at the time I had a son that was due to be born, it didn't really make sense for me to continue to pursue the CCIE security. Now, granted, when I did walk away from the second attempt, I actually did the very next day book another lab attempt for the third lab attempt to actually do the exam just before Christmas. I think it was a week away from Christmas, if that. And after a few days of reflecting, like I said, I did some reflecting. I spoke with my partner. I looked at all the other things that I wanted to try and achieve in the coming year. I decided that it wouldn't be wise, or it wouldn't be fair on me to continue that process, especially with having the imminent arrival of my newborn, and also expecting my then pregnant partner to continue to hold down pretty much everything personally, while I was just solely focused on hammering this exam. And on top of that, it really wasn't good for my health. I ended up with some neck problems because I just spent so much time sat at the PC. If I wasn't working at the computer, I was studying at the computer, and it really didn't do any favors for my neck or my back. And to a point, I actually ended up going to see a chiropractor to try and get it sorted out. I still have a little bit of pain now and then, but after some reflection, I realized that health and everything else is also equally, or if not more so, important than just trying to get a certification. So I will go back and get the CCIE security. I don't know when, especially now that the changes have just been announced, and there's going to be version 6.1 coming out at the back end of this year. It wouldn't be wise for me. I have thought about trying to attempt it again before that 6.1 change, even though the changes are not that much. Nevertheless, they are changes. but I just don't know where I stand yet in terms of, you know, what I want to do about that, because there's so many other things that I still want to focus on. You know, there's the rise in artificial intelligence now. I've got my friend and colleague out there, John, who's doing amazing things, sharing it on Twitter all the time, and also internally within Cisco. And that excites me, and I want to also get into that and learn about more about AI and machine learning. And I did do some of that last year. I actually went through 2 certifications with Microsoft. One of them was an AI fundamentals, which was a good learning curve and something different for me. But my point is, I want to do a lot more, and sometimes you get lost when you focus just on one thing for too long. Sometimes you just need to step back, take some time out, or do something else, and then revisit it a little bit later. And when I actually thought about it, it was the same process I did when I actually first tried to pass the CCIE security written back when it was version 5. I think I did 3 attempts of just trying to rush to try and pass the written exam, just so that I could do the lab exam before it changed to version 6.0. And when I look back now, it wasn't a wise thing to do, because as soon as that version change came and I sat another certification to get the CCNP security / CCIE written security, it I managed to pass that straight away, because the technologies and the requirements were different. The exam was focused on the more recent technologies, and that was the technologies that I was working with at the time in Cisco. So it suited me more to do that, and it paid off because I passed it the first time. So this is really the, not approach, but this is sort of the way that I see the CCIE security for me. So it's not something that I'm not going to pursue. It's just I don't know when I'm going to pursue it yet. I am tempted to pick it up now, but I don't know if it's a wise idea, given that there's so many things going on in my life right now, so many other things that I want to do, and I just know how time consuming it is. And I think a little bit of me is also thinking, I was in that phase last year where I had my process, I knew exactly what it was that I was doing, and to go back to that is it's I see it as going to the gym again. When you don't go to the gym for a while and you go back, it's difficult. And I see the CCIE security as that. So when I jump back into it again, I might get a little bit frustrated because I forgot certain things that I did know that I'm not using every day. But nevertheless, we'll see. Anyway, enough about the CCIE security. I just wanted to point that out because that took up a lot of my time, and it kind of stopped me from doing the other things. And that other thing, or one of the other things, was actually getting the CISSP. So obviously, after all the reevaluation and deciding not to jump straight back into the CCIE, at the back end of and by the way, we're going to talk now about sort of how the CISSP came about, the process that I went through, and how I ended up ultimately passing and getting certified now. So after all that CCIE stuff, I decided in, I think it was November last year, 2022, so fairly fresh straight out of the CCIE stuff. There was an email that kind of went round internally within Cisco about some CISSP training group that I could be a part of, and I put my hand up for that because I thought it would be a good idea to kind of switch paths and actually get a certification, that another certification that I wanted to get. At the time, I thought, am I being a little bit silly, because this is also up there when it comes to one difficulty and the amount of things that you need to know for the CISSP as it was for the CISSP. CCIE. But nevertheless, I thought, let's give it a crack. It is something that I wanted to do for a while, so let's try and get it out of the way. So I put my hand up, and I ended up joining a group internally within Cisco, and decided to start going through some training. There was some suggested steps and recommendations. One of those was to sort of pick a book, so the official CISSP book or the all-in-one CISSP book, and read the whole contents cover to cover by February. So it sounds like a lot of time, but it really isn't, especially when you've got Christmas around the corner. You're a recovering CCIE security crackhead, basically. And you are trying to get some of your time back by actually absolutely doing nothing and just enjoying doing nothing, because you spent a whole year just studying and working. On top of that as well, family time, work, and lastly, reading. There's one thing that I've never really been good at is actually reading cover to cover. What I tend to do is I read a little bit, and then I'll do some labbing or something else to kind of mix it up, videos maybe, and then I'll go back to reading certain topics and points. But in this instance, I had to read a whole book. That was the recommendation, that was the path, and that was the requirement before February, before we actually started getting into these classes where we discussed the topics of the CISSP. So that was a really big thing for me that I didn't think I'd be able to do. The other thing was note taking, and we'll discuss that in a minute. But so the fast forward to the new year, I did very little reading. Well, before I actually get into that, I actually picked the originally the all-in-one CISSP exam guide book, and I'll share my resources that I used in a blog post, and I'll attach that to the link in this video so that you can take a look at the resources that I used and that I'm going to speak about in today's session. But I picked the all-in-one CISSP book, and I started reading it before the new year, stopped, and then got into the new year, and then pretty much started planning for Cisco Live. And bearing in mind, I've got a newborn baby as well at the same time. So, I'm having to do a lot of personal things as well. And aside from the work, and then I think in February, Cisco Live came around. And by that point, I was about halfway through the book. Just less than halfway through the book. And this book is about 1,100 pages plus long. So it's a really big book. And if you're not used to reading, especially cover to cover, that is a massive feat. So the fact that I was actually getting through it was a big thing. The other thing, I mentioned note taking. So when it comes to note taking, I'm always used to reading or watching content and taking notes as I go, so that I can go back and reference that a little bit later on. And that takes up a lot of time. For anybody that's done that or still does that, that takes up a lot of time, as I'm sure you're aware. And what I was told to do was, when I was asked how far along I am in terms of pages, because I think it worked out you were supposed to be reading about 4 chapters a week or something like that in order to get through the book before the session started in February. And that's a lot, especially if you see the book. You'll know that's a lot with the detail in the book as well. So I thought, well, surely that must mean note taking as well. Surely you can't just retain all this. One person just can't retain all this information just by simply reading the book. And that's true, by the way. You can't retain all the information. You're not meant to retain the information. But what you are sort of meant to retain the information, but not necessarily in the depth at which the book highlights everything, if that makes sense. So when I told the instructors, if you like, that I was taking notes as I was going along, and that's why I wasn't kind of sticking to the mandate of 4 chapters a week or whatever it may have been, they told me to, stop writing notes and just read the book. Just read the book, don't write notes, and you'll be surprised. And as someone that's never done that, I thought, really? I'm going to read this book and am I going to feel like I've just wasted a whole lot of time by the time I finished it because I just don't remember very much. And to my surprise, actually, when I finished reading the book, I was really surprised at how much I actually retained. And that kind of shed a new light on the way that I study for certain certifications now, because I'm probably not going to take a lot of notes like I used to do, because to be honest, some of the note taking that I did do for previous certifications, I don't revisit, especially when you're actually going through certifications on technologies that you work with on a daily basis. You just come to know those technologies, so you don't need to refer to notes every day. So it's probably been a game changer for me in that respect, because it's going to change the way that I now study for a lot of things, especially given that I've managed to pass the CISSP by using this method that I'm now telling you about. So anyways, Cisco Live came in February and was really busy there doing that. And just after Cisco Live, the intention was to get into the lessons, to speak about the content that we'd covered in the book in more depth, just to help retain that knowledge and also pick up on some new things that you might not have really understood. And this was a group thing, and I joined a few of those sessions. And after the first or second session, the instructor told us to look at booking the CISSP exam. And even that in itself for me was like crazy, because I thought, wow, like the amount of content in this that the CISSP covers, and we've literally just read the book and you're telling us to book the exam. It seems a little bit wild, but he was the instructor and we were kind of listening to the instructor. So I came to a point where I was actually going to book the certification, the CISSP exam. Now, it's been a long-standing thing within Cisco that, and probably a lot of other companies that care about your education and progress, that they will fund your certifications and things like that. Now, the CISSP is a very expensive certification. It's around just over £700 UK. So it's quite expensive, and that's just for one attempt. And when I came to look at booking that, I was under the impression that I could get that paid or expense through my company, and unfortunately it turned out that I wasn't able to expense that. Now for me that was a bit of a bummer, because I am due to get married in the coming year. So at the moment it's more I'm more focused on trying to make sure the wedding and everything else and the honeymoon and personal life is all sorted, as opposed to trying to fund certifications that cost that amount of money. So I was a little bit disappointed and disheartened, because I have always mainly had my certifications covered by my employer, sorry. So a little bit disheartened, and at that point I decided to pull out of the training and not go for the CISSP. So At the time, I thought, right, it's been a bit of a waste of time. What else can I do now? And I decided to start looking at other certifications that I also want to do, and books that I purchased. And it was only when we're in May now. It was only last month in April, probably at the start of April, that one of my colleagues that also was going for the CISSP actually followed through and paid for it and ended up passing the CISSP. And it was only after we had the conversation together and he kind of told me about his experience and how he found it. And also the fact that I saw that ISC Squared were doing an offer where you could basically get a second attempt at an exam of theirs. So in my case, a second attempt at the CISSP for a discounted price if you weren't able to pass it the first time. It was because of those two things that I really got inspired again, if you like, and decided to take it upon myself and just pay for it myself and fund it myself. And you know, nobody can ever take that away from me because I've done that myself. I've gone through it myself. I've done the training myself, and you know, and I've passed it myself. You know, that's mine. You know, no one is going to take that away from me. And so I really appreciate the conversation me and my colleague had at the time, because that just gave me a newfound motivation to just cough up the funds and to pay for the exam. Now the only thing was, when I when I paid for the exam, I took advantage of the essentially 2-for-1 offer that ISC Squared was offering, and that was the, like I say, if you don't, it's called a peace of mind offer. So it was, if you didn't pass it the first time, you could do the second attempt for free, but there was some sort of guidelines around that. You had to do it within a certain time frame, the first attempt, and also the second attempt if you didn't pass the first attempt as well. And also you would pay a slightly increased cost as opposed to paying just for the single exam voucher. So I think all in all, I think I paid with the conversion fees as well. I think I paid close to £800. It might have even been over £800 just for the certification. So it was a big steep cost, and I think the fact that I had the safety net, you know, in case I didn't pass the first time, that really helped as well, because I always kind of go into these exams and think about it in a way that you know, if you there's always the potential that you're not going to pass the first time. So bear that in mind, because you may end up actually doing it a second time. And if you're invested, and when you're paying that sort of money, you are invested. So if you're invested, then you're going to want to make sure you've got the funds to cover it the second time. So this safety net really helped me. So that's one of the reasons why I ended up doing it as well. So the exam's all booked and paid for now, and now I've got the pressure of trying to pass that certification in, I think it was around a month, literally 4 weeks. And this is what kind of scared me a little bit at the time, because I had gone through the content. I didn't finish the book at the time when I dropped the internal course the first time. I didn't finish the book, so I had to not only pick the book back up and finish the book, but I also had to go back to refresh on some of the other topics that I'd already covered the months prior, and I had to do that all in 4 weeks, as well as try to make sure that I understood as many topics as possible within there, and also to ensure that I felt confident enough with the exam and the way that the questions were going to be asked, because you know, when you speak to anybody about the CISSP, or you have a look at online about sort of experiences, you'll see that the CISSP is, or people say that the CISSP is not designed to be necessarily a technical exam, and you need to think more like a manager. So like someone on like C-suite or like CISSO, CISO, CISO, CIO, people like that to be able to answer these questions. And you also need to understand the breadth of the book and what's in there to be able to answer the questions, because the way that the questions are worded, you really need to understand why the other ones are not correct over the correct answer or answers. So that was a big thing as well, because being someone that's always been technical, you know, I had to kind of shift, or mainly technical, should I say, I had to shift my mindset in this respect to think like a manager, like people say, think like a manager for the CISSP. So how was I going to do that? Well, I saw a few things online, a few suggestions and strategies, and I also saw a few books. One of those books was Think Like a Manager, How to Think Like a Manager for the CISSP by Luke Hamid. So shout out to him for his book, because I ended up actually purchasing that book, and that book kind of contains, I believe, 25 questions, and they're designed to be hard for a reason, and it also breaks down why the right answer is the right answer, and also why the wrong answers are not the right answer as well. And it gives you different scenarios and topics to go through as well. So I purchased that book to kind of help shift my mindset, and that did help somewhat by going through his book. So I went through his book once. I also didn't lean too heavy on the fact that people say you need to think like a manager, because when I was going through test questions, some of the questions did require technical knowledge, and I'm going to say now that the test questions are very different. Don't matter which test questions you do, you're not going to get questions like you see on the exam. So kind of take the test questions not necessarily with a pinch of salt, but just use them as a light tool to gauge where you are with the understanding of the topics, to kind of assess how ready you are for the exam if you are taking the exam. But one thing that I realized was that some of the questions did actually require technical knowledge in order to answer the questions. So I would say it's a fairly mixed bag with the practice questions that were coming across as well. And when I thought about it a little bit more, the CISSP actually requires 5 years of experience in order to become certified CISSP. And there's a reason for that, you know, because you need that work experience. You need to have kind of been in certain situations and environments and be exposed to certain technologies in order to understand what they're talking about. You know, yes, it's okay reading a book, but also real life experiences do matter. So I found that when I was reading the book, when I was doing some practice questions, I could put a lot of that stuff into context, and sometimes actually come up with scenarios in my head that I've maybe been through, or similar situations that I may have been through, to be able to answer a question. But at the same time, it's important not to get too bogged down in the technical detail, because me being as technical as I am, some of the questions I would read and think, well, technically, if you looked at it this way or did this, or if based on the question it could change. But don't do that, because like I said, technically I was trying to answer the questions technically, all of them, and that's not the way you do it. Nevertheless, 4 weeks to study, and by the way, it was a requirement, like I said, once you took out this peace of mind offer, that you had to sit the exam at certain times, before certain times, for it to be eligible. I ended up managing to find a location, a Pearson View location, to sit this exam on the last day of when the requirements said that you need to have sat the first attempt. So I had to go away, stayed in a hotel for all of that, and all that good stuff to be able to do that exam. So I was quite fortunate that I was able to push it right to the last day to do it. So my plan was that we've had a few bank holidays here in the UK, especially at the start of May, and with the King's coronation and all that good stuff that were going on. And I kind of used that to my advantage because it meant that I had more time outside of work to be able to study towards this CISSP. So I used all that to my advantage, and I also took 1 week off of work so that I could just solely focus on CISSP content, reviewing exam topics, going through tests, reviewing the material that I was still unsure about. And my plan was to spend from Monday to Friday, quite literally, or Monday to Sunday rather, because my exam was on the following Monday, just studying test review, and making sure that I'd pretty much exhausted everything that I could before the exam. And unfortunately, it just didn't go that way for me. The Monday came, and I've got 2 little ones, and for anyone that's got little kids knows that it's quite often they pick up bugs and things like that. And fortunately, one of my, or in fact, both of my children weren't too well, but one of them wasn't particularly well. And it ended up that we had to take him to accident and emergency twice within the week, 2 different days, for issues that he was currently dealing with. So that took up a lot of time as well. There were other situations where I just couldn't study when I wanted to study and just felt like I was wasting so much time. And, basically personal life just got in the way, and it was if at times I felt, is it a sign? Is it a sign saying that I'm not ready and I shouldn't be doing the exam yet? Nevertheless, every little occasion I got, I tried to study. I tried to do practice tests. So when I was kind of sat outside the hospital in my car with my other son, I would try and distract him with a Nintendo Switch or something like that. And while he was kind of doing that, I was on my iPad going through some official CISSP practice questions and trying to get through that. There were times where I would be looking after the children, and as chaotic as it could be, I'd be doing practice tests with 125 questions, and with the timer running, and I'd still have to get through that. And I actually put a post on Twitter actually saying if I can I pass these practice tests, and I said, if I could actually pass these practice tests in the current circumstances, then surely I can pass this CISSP exam, as a bit of a joke. And well, maybe it paid off. But it just wasn't a good week for me. And I got to the weekend where everything had kind of calmed down a little bit. I spent some time with the family over the weekend, took the little one swimming, and then on the Sunday I had to make my way down to the location to where I would be taking the exam, because I was staying in a hotel so that I could get to a test centre on the Monday morning, because the exam started at 8 o'clock in the morning, so you had to be there at like 7:30, 30 minutes before. And on the Sunday, and by the way, it was actually one of my children's birthday that same week, so I had to take time out for that as well. So by the time Sunday came, I felt like I could get a little bit of studying in the morning before I'd set off down to the hotel, and then I'd do some more studying when I got to the hotel. Now, come lunchtime on the Sunday, I felt myself coming down with flu. So I started getting pains in my back, headache, just feeling absolutely rubbish. And I just thought, maybe it's nothing. I took some painkillers, and shortly afterwards, I finished the practice test. I passed that practice test, which gave me a little bit more confidence. And then I decided I'd review the wrong answers of that practice test once I got to the hotel, and then I'd do some additional studying before the exam in the morning. So I set off to the hotel. I'd not really eaten much, so I stopped off to get a pasta that I could eat on the way to as I was driving to the location. And as time went on, I just felt myself getting worse. And by the time I got to the hotel, I was in a bad way. I was aching. I felt for those that have had flu, it was just that, I felt awful, absolutely awful. I just wanted to get into bed and I wanted to sleep. And again, I just was thinking, is this another sign? Like, can this week get any worse? Why is this happening? The day before my exam, everything's been fine up until this 1 week, and everything just seems to have happened. And I was feeling a bit dizzy, lightheaded, all that stuff. And I knew, because the exam was at 8 o'clock in the morning and I was in a different area that I wasn't familiar with, I knew that I had to go and find the location of where the test center was. Yes, I'd seen it on Google Maps, but that's very different to seeing it in person. And also, I didn't want to be spending time in the morning of the exam trying to find a location when I just wanted to get there and do the exam. So I knew that I needed to go back out rather than just being able to jump in bed and do a bit of studying and going to sleep. So I went back out and I just braved it and went to go find the location of Pearson View, of the test centre where I would be doing the exam the next day. Fortunately, it was only about 10 minutes away from the hotel, which was good. So I managed to find that and walk back. And actually, I felt a little bit better by walking and getting some fresh air. When I got back to the hotel, the symptom just kind of hit me again, full on slapped me in the face again. And as the time went on, I just felt so bad. And it got to a point actually where I reviewed I took some more painkillers, by the way. I reviewed my wrong questions from the exam that I did before I set off to the hotel. I did some more reading with my 2 books. I had the all-in-one CISSP book at the time, and I also had the official certification guide that I ended up using as well as sort of I ended up reading both of them actually in the end. And I'll kind of discuss a little bit more about that in my blog post as well. But just to kind of finish off this point here is that when I did that review and finished those reviewing of the test questions, I did a few flashcards. I was feeling so bad by 9 p.m, which is absolutely not like me. I'm never really sleeping unless it's midnight, and by 9 p.m, I was in that bed trying to get some sleep or at least sweating out whatever the hell was going on. And at that point, I actually didn't think I would be able to make the exam the next morning. I thought I was just going to be bedridden in a hotel and not be able to make that exam. Fortunately, I think what I did by making that decision just to put everything away and try and get some sleep at 9 o'clock and drugging myself up with painkillers, I feel like that helped, because it got to midnight and I'd woken up. I didn't really sleep anyway. It was a weird sleep. But it got to midnight and I woke up and I actually thought I'd slept for like 8 hours. It was crazy. So I actually, when I saw the time at like, it literally just gone midnight, I thought, oh wow, now I've got to sleep for another at least 6 hours or try sleep. So the night was a bit awful, didn't really sleep, felt rubbish. And then when I got up in the morning, I took some more painkillers, and I stood up and realized that I wasn't shivering. You know, when you feel hot but you're cold and vice versa, that's kind of how I was feeling the night before. So I thought, if I feel like that and I'm literally shivering, I'm probably not going to be able to do this exam. And I got up in the morning and I still didn't feel great. And I think actually the painkillers were helping more so than anything. But, you know, I could stand up and I wasn't shivering. I felt a little bit cold, even though I was warm. But I decided to try and go stomach some breakfast. So I went to go get some breakfast and got a few rashers of bacon, some sausage and some egg, and I didn't barely eat anything. I just didn't have the appetite. I just ended up getting a coffee and walking down to the exam centre. I set off from my hotel at about 7:30 and got there about 20 to 8. Did all the checking in process, showed my ID, all that good stuff, put my stuff in the locker, and was pretty much straight in to start the exam. Now, fortunately, I didn't feel too bad. I think even though I had a rubbish sleep on and off, I think because I went to bed so early, it helped. But I still felt a little bit of brain fog, if you like, when I was sat there doing the exam and reading the questions. And that's because I had flu. I didn't feel too good. And I honestly was at a point where, you know, I kind of said to myself, you know, look, obviously I want to pass. I was telling myself in the mirror, I'm going to pass this exam the night before. But at the same time, you know, I was in a position where I thought, well, you know, I'm here. Let's just give it a crack. If I don't pass, you know, it's not the end of the world because I've got another attempt and I'm not feeling too well. But at the same time, I wanted to pass that time because it's always I never really like going back to exams to do the exam again and try it again knowing that you failed the first time. For me, it's just not a good feeling. Anyway, went through the exam. And I was going through the exam, and at no point through the exam did I feel as though I just didn't feel confident. I didn't feel like I were particularly answering the questions right, and this is, you know, really because of the way that they word the questions. I'm telling you, it's just a different kettle of fish, and you know, if you're going to take this exam, you're going to see for yourself. A lot of questions had me second guessing myself, even though I knew I thought I knew the right answer. And I was just going through question by question. Some questions, I think it works out on average, you have about 4 hours with potentially 150 questions, I think it is, potentially. And I had that in the back of my mind, and I knew that I had about 1 minute approximately to answer a question. So it's not really a lot of time, especially if you know how these exams are sometimes worded in terms of the questions and the scenarios you get. It requires a lot of thinking. So I found myself spending, you know, sometimes 4 minutes on a question, 5 minutes on a question, but then other questions I was spending less than a minute on, you know, maybe spending 10 seconds on and then going to the next one. And I got to about question 100, and I think at this point, you know, it determines whether you have enough to pass the exam, or if you've just done absolutely crap, you potentially it'll just stop the exam and say you failed, you don't meet the bar to be able to pass. I think that's how it works. So at that point I thought, right, okay, it's crunch time now. How much time have I got left? And surprisingly, I had well over an hour left of the exam. And at the time I thought, well, is it because I've flown through this too quick? I've not really thought about the questions and answered them correctly. Is it going to end the test on the next screen and that means I've failed? How many more questions am I going to get? And anyway, it carried on to question 125, and you know, that's exactly like the practice tests I were doing. And then after question 125, the exam stopped, and it don't give you any indication or anything as to whether you've passed, which is what I was looking for straight away, because I just wanted to end that misery straight away if I'd failed. it just stopped the exam, ended, black screen, and then I had to leave the room, and I went to hand the whiteboard and pen back, and then I went to go get my stuff out of the locker. Well, in fact, before I went up to the locker, I went straight to the woman who prints out the paper, and I heard my paper being printed out, and she's like, "Oh, just go get your stuff out of the locker first." And I'm thinking to myself, I want to know the result first. I don't want to get my stuff first. Anyway, I thought, well, at least if I get my stuff on first and get ready to get out of there, at least I can kind of hang my head in shame if I've failed. And honestly, when I left the exam, I didn't know. I couldn't really gauge whether I'd done enough to pass or to fail, even though I'm quite confident in some of the answers that I were giving on the exam. I'd studied the content in depth. I'd reviewed my weak areas. I'd done a lot of work. I really did put a lot of effort into making sure that I understood the concepts and topics within the CISSP, and also the work experience as well. Like I said, work experience speaks volumes, and that really helped as well. So, I did really feel like I was in a position to pass that exam and feel like I had what it took to pass that exam. And when the questions were coming up on that screen, I did understand for the most part what it is they were asking. Sometimes, and I say most part, and that's because sometimes I would, the way they worded the question would get me second guessing what I believe was the right answer or potentially right answer, because I'd start thinking with a managerial hat, and then I'd start thinking with a technical hat as well. And I think that got me in trouble a little bit on the exam. But I just kind of snapped out of it, stayed focused. I kind of said to myself inside, I said, no, just stay focused. Don't let your eyes glaze over. For those that are familiar with that, sometimes your eyes glaze over in these exams. And I just pushed through. I said, it's going to be what it's going to be. And when I got that paper and I walked out, I didn't know what to expect. In all honesty, there was a lot of things running through my mind, and on top of that, I just didn't feel too good. I think the painkillers were wearing off, and I was starting to feel a bit rubbish again. And I turned over my sheet, folded my sheet. In fact, is this the sheet here? Yeah. So I turned over my sheet, so it was folded like this. I turned over the sheet like this, and it basically, the first, it gives you your name, but the first thing there says congratulations if you've passed. And as soon as I saw that, I actually closed the sheet again, because I thought, no, I passed. As if I've passed, I've really done it, even under the circumstances, even under the crazy week that I've had. I managed to do this, and it really shows that I obviously know what I'm talking about, and I've done what I needed to do to get the job done. And I opened it again, and just confirmed that I wasn't seeing things, and it wasn't the drugs that were making me see things. And when I actually realized that I'd passed, obviously I did the normal thing. I shared it with my family, friends, colleagues, and shared it with you guys online as well. And yeah, even though I was still sick, it made my day a lot better. I didn't really get to enjoy it, because as soon as I got home, I just wanted to rest. But the point is, I've passed it, and I'm a CISSP now, and I'm really proud and happy that I can actually say that now. So that's my story. That was my journey. That's how crazy it was. I had 4 weeks to pick up the books again, go through the content again, make sure I understood it all again before actually taking the exam. So it wasn't a lot of time, but I managed to do it. And I think the process that I used also helped me get through that as well. And we'll touch on that process now for those that are interested, and those that are wanting to potentially follow it or adapt it, or just listen to sort of what process I use. So I won't spend too much time on it, because I will share the resources on my blog. However, as I said at the start, I started out with the all-in-one CISSP book, and I ended up reading that cover to cover. And at the end of each chapter, it has end of chapter tests in that book that you can go through. And at the end of every chapter, I actually went through those chapter tests, and for the most part, I were only getting one or two incorrect. So I was moving on to the next chapter. So I ended up doing that throughout the whole book. When I finished the all-in-one guide, and I'd spoke to my colleague who passed the CISSP, who gave me some tips as well, I purchased the official CISSP certification guide as well. And the reason I did that was because the topics, although obviously cover the same domains, they were slightly different in the way, one, they were worded, and two, some of the things that they actually covered. And what I would say is that the all-in-one guide goes into a lot of detail, and probably detail that you won't necessarily need. However, it gives you that, if you are not familiar with certain topics, it will give you a good understanding of what it is that you're covering. The official certification guide gives you exactly what you need in terms of the information level you need before moving on to the next thing. So if I had to do it again, I would actually read the official certification guide first, and then if I wanted to expand on certain topics, then I would get the all-in-one certification guide to do that. Nevertheless, I ended up reading the actually, before I ended up reading the official certification guide as well, which wasn't the intention, by the way, I actually in the back of the all-in-one CISSP book, there's an assessment that you can go through. I think it's 100 and some questions, and I ended up going through that as well. I ended up passing that the first time. I got some wrong, and I reviewed those wrong ones just to see, you know, where my weak areas were. And I think I already knew where my weak areas were, and it was I think in the software domain, because that's not, you know, where I really focus my everyday efforts. So I already knew that, and I focused on my weak areas a lot more. Anyway, I passed that, and I also, at the same time, when I was doing all this, when I was doing these practice tests, I was actually documenting it in, I made a spreadsheet where I actually documented everything, because my plan was to actually review the ones that I got wrong, as well as review some of the ones that I got right, and also then do the tests again once I've reviewed the topics, to make sure that that information was then solidified so that I could move on. And I actually did that, and that, I think it made things put things into a better perspective for me. As I say, I went on then to read the official certification guide, the CISSP guide, and that was never my intention. I bought that book as sort of more a reference to refer to when I wanted to review topics. So my plan was to really not use the all-in-one guide to review topics, but use the new book to review topics, to get a little bit of a different perspective. Nevertheless, what I ended up doing was going to every end chapter, and more so, the reason this came about actually was because when I told you that I put down the books and said I wasn't going to do the certification because of the cost and funding it myself, those chapters that I did read in the early stages, I forgot a lot of that information, if you like. So for me, it was a case initially to pick up those chapters in that book by just doing the practice tests at the end of those chapters to see actually how much information I'd retained. I also logged that as well to see how well I did for each chapter, and I actually ended up doing it for every single chapter in the book. And what I did is, once I did the end of chapter exams, without reading the chapters first, I just went straight to the end of the chapter exams. Once I did that, I reviewed the content by actually reading the chapters. So I ended up actually reading the whole chapter, the whole book again, by reading the chapters of each of the sections again, just to review topics and refresh topics, and to understand topics better than I thought I understood them the first time. And I think that really helped, because even though it seems like a lot, is really helping. You really do need to know this information when you're going for this CISSP exam. because I think one of the sayings is it's a mile wide. The information's a mile wide and an inch deep. There's just so much information that you need to be aware of for this exam. So for me, it was really key to make sure that I understood everything that I could before doing the exam. So I did that anyway, and once I did that, I then purchased the official ISC Squared app on my iPad, and I purchased a subscription of $14.99 per month, because my intention was to obviously just use it for that month and hopefully pass the exam. Then I cancel this subscription. But by doing so, by purchasing that, you actually got access to the exams, the practice tests, to do the 125 questions. There were quite a few that you could do. And then at the same time, and I'll show you this in my blog as well, but at the same time, you would be able to gauge your readiness. So it was sort of like a readiness index that really helped show how ready you potentially were for the exam. And there were also, for each domain, it would also show you how well you did in each domain and your weak areas, so that you could actually focus on your weak areas. And mine, I already knew mine, and by going through the app and going through the tests, this actually just solidified it for me. It showed me that what I was thinking was correct, and it allowed me to then focus specifically more on certain areas. And that's exactly what I did. So I tried to do a practice test a day of 125 questions, which is a lot. It's a lot, and the questions are a lot because you need to really think about these questions. So you're looking at, potentially 3 hours per day. That didn't work out quite the way I wanted it to, but I ended up, I think, doing about not three, I ended up doing about 7 practice tests at 125 questions each, so quite a lot. I think I ended, all in all, if you consider the questions I did in the book with the assessment, both books rather, the app, and I also did some questions online on the Pearson test bank as well, I probably easily did over 3,000 questions. And the point I'm trying to make is that I used the app to gauge how ready I was in a sense of understanding each domain, and used it as a way to be able to reference the book again where I needed to on topics that I didn't really understand, and that really helped me. It also has flashcards on there, so I actually used the digital flashcards one day before the exam, I think it was, or 2 days, maybe 1 or 2 days before the exam, and I just went through the exam essentials. There's an exam essentials on there that allows you to go through some of the important topics, and that just really helped me sort of focus on some of the things that I may have slightly forgotten about because I was focusing on the more weaker areas as well. Now, in those practice tests, I passed every single one of them apart from one. I would do the practice tests on mainly an evening, which and mainly under chaotic conditions, as I've already mentioned. So it wasn't ideal circumstances. I failed one, I think I got like 68%, and I was really tired that evening when I was doing it. But I did them under, I wanted to do them under ideal circumstances, and I wanted to try and do it in the morning, just like as I was taking the exam, but that never worked out. But that app really helped. It really helped me get through, and it really helped me see where my weak areas were and the areas where I needed to really focus. So I did that, and like I said, the last thing that I used really was aside from the How to Think Like a Manager book from Luke Hamid that I've already mentioned, I used the Pearson practice test bank, which you get access to if you have the official certification book as well. Now, what I would say with those practice tests is that I think the test bank that I was using was from 2000, so last year's test bank, I think, which was very handy and useful because you really get a feel for how some of the questions may be presented on the real exam. So I would recommend that as well. I would say on that one, those questions were really somewhat challenging. I think I did 2 of those, and out of 2 of those, I think one of them I got 680 out of 700, which I should have, got to pass. But I would say, if I had to put them in order, I would say probably that the Pearson test bank is more similar to what you're going to see, and then I would also say the ISC squared questions on that app is a good indicator as well, to see what you're going to be faced with as well. The ones in the book are just really obviously focused on what you covered on each chapter, so it's not necessarily used to I wouldn't really use that as an indicator as to what you're going to get on the exam. Aside from that, that's all I used really. That's literally all I use. Like I say, work experience and being in the industry is a big thing. Having that experience is a big thing as well. Being able to relate to certain subjects and topics is a massive thing. And aside from using my Excel sheet that I created to track where I was at, that's literally the only thing that I use to get by really. And yeah, that's it. So that's how I managed to crack the CISSP exam, if you like, in 4 weeks, under less than ideal circumstances. And I'm just so happy that I can now say that I am CISSP. So people have been asking me to share my experience. I hope you have found that useful. Like I say, I will be sharing a blog post on the materials that I've mentioned, the materials that I used to go through and to learn as much as possible to get the CISSP. So do look out for that on my website, networkwizkid.com. People have also asked me what I will be doing next. I'm actually in a phase of enjoying doing nothing at the moment, in terms of nothing outside of work and family. They're very much still keeping me busy, by the way. I do have some thoughts. Like I said before, I am debating on what I should do about the CCIE security. I do want to start looking more into APIs. I want to do a lot more around ethical hacking. I want to do more around just the Linux side of things in general. I want to look at Python. Did I mention AI and Microsoft? I want to do work quite a lot with Microsoft at the moment in terms of cloud-based deployments, so around Azure, things like that. My website, where I've just changed and I'm looking at developing courses, as some of you may know, I'm focused on trying to bring content as an independent creator to those that are interested as well. So I've got a wealth of things that I need to focus on and things that I want to do. I'm just trying to work out which way is the best way to do that. So who knows? I think I'm just going to take some time to really decide what it is that I want to do. I have some time off coming where I'm going to enjoy with my family, which is important. As I realized last year, I didn't spend that much time with them, and family is everything. So I need to make sure I make time for that. And lastly, my health's important. I really want to. I've got a gym membership and I've been neglecting the gym. So I really need to get back into that and just start enjoying life a little bit more, because life's just not all about certifications and working. It's nice when you've got them, but I think you need to have a well-balanced approach to achieving them. So I'm trying to live by what I preach, really. But I'm finding it difficult because I like learning, I like studying, and I like picking up new things. So we'll see. But that's all for the Tech Dialogue podcast today. I really appreciate you listening and rocking with me today on this podcast. If you would like to be on this podcast, have a conversation with me, please do reach out to me on any of my socials, or you can always email me as well by going through my website. I would love to chat to you about certifications or work or life in general. Let's just have a chat. Just let me know. But thank you for listening and watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.